Thank you again, everybody, for joining today. So we plan on diving into a critical challenge in the food and beverage industry, recalls and compliance, and how Business Central paired with YAVEON ProBatch can turn risk into opportunity. So one recall can cost millions in lost revenue, damage reputation, and regulatory fines. Yet compliance with FSMA, SQF, and BRC is non-negotiable for staying competitive. We'll show you how integrated technology can simplify compliance, reduce risk, and keep your business ahead of the curve. So, as a consumer, I'm sure we have all seen these recall messages far too often recently in our local grocery stores. But as a food and beverage manufacturer, this is the last way we want to communicate with our customers. So I'm sure, all of our, everybody on the call today, has dealt with a recall or the fear of one in the past year. So let's start with the numbers that keep us up at night. Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So when I really want to understand a issue or an argument, I really start with data. And then I'll take a look at the data and I will define kind of what the scope and the urgency is. And that gives me a better understanding of what I'm looking at. Sometimes I'm a data nerd, so I'll take that data and I'll put some pictures together. So those pictures are about what I'm about to produce here. So let's get started. So on the screen, you see recalls. These are the number of recalls in a given year. So between 2018 and 2024, we're looking at anywhere from about 300 to 400 different recalls in a given year. That's almost one recall a day. Now, keep in mind that these are discrete, individual recalls. These aren't bulked together in a mass recall. These are basically individual recalls altogether. So you can see that between 2018 and 2021, the trend was up, and then it dipped. But what I'm going to tell you is that 2022, 23, and 24 are all starting to trend up as well. So the recall is not going away. So now that we know the size, now that we know kind of who it's affecting, let's take a look at the cause. Now, from a recall perspective, we've got about 49% of the recalls are allergen-based. These are really undeclared allergens, or maybe they're cross-contamination made up of during the production line. And they're generally the big nine. So they're your milk, your dairy, your tree nuts, your peanuts, some gluten, as well as others. That makes up the bulk of the recalls that are happening. But if we come to the bottom section of the clock here, we're at about 25% bacterial. And this is your salmonella and your listeria. And if you guys remember, we had a pretty big recall back in 2024 with the McDonald's. And that ultimately traced down to an onion that caused that. And that's the bacterial aspect of that. Rounding out the clock here, we've got foreign objects and labeling. Those are some of the big areas and the causes for our particular recalls. So now we've got the scale and we got the causes. Well, really, how severe is this problem? This chart shows the different classes of recalls that are available. So class 3 really represents an unlikely to cause a health effect. This is really basic stuff. Maybe there's a packaging mislabel, or maybe there's a minor ingredient not on the ledger. So something minor that's not going to affect somebody. Class 2 represents a remote possibility, really, for an adverse health consequence. And this represents maybe it's a allergen that's not a life-threatening allergen, or maybe it's not an urgent allergen, but something that might have happened in the production process. But key on class 1, that's 50% of the recall these days. This represents a severe probability that there's going to be a serious health consequence or even death. This is where you get your tree nut allergens. This is where you get your gluten allergens that are cross-contamination during that manufacturing process, or maybe it's contamination from a salmonella perspective. 50% of the recalls are class 1, which is telling you how urgent this issue is and how serious the food and bev industry has to take it. So now we know the cause, we know the size, we know the severity. Does it affect me? Does it affect you? So let's look at the industries. So first and foremost, the produce industry in its very production and preparation has a really high potential for contamination. They've taken huge steps in the last 5 years to mitigate this. But again, it's still an open issue that takes continued resolve. Number two is the meat industry. And the road to market is a long road. And the meat industry has taken it very, very seriously, but they continue to have recalls as well. And then if I finish out the top three categories, bakery and dairy kind of tie out for the top three. So the reason why I'm showing you this chart is to highlight really that nobody is exempt. Everybody needs to be vigilant. Everybody needs to be watching over this process. And it's not just one single manufacturer. This is a process that really involves everybody, from your raw materials and your suppliers, all the way through your manufacturing process, up through the retailers that you sell to, and finally, even the consumers have to be vigilant in what they do. Finally, these aren't just stats either. These are real world pain points. So in the next slide, let's take a look at some of the barriers that come up when we're looking at food traceability and how we can stay in front of this food compliance headache. So the barriers to compliance are really metrics that prevent organizations from being safe with their food. These are 5 major buckets that really prevent or hinder the capability of putting in a food traceability program in the robust nature that it needs to be entered in it. The first one on the left is supplier disconnect. So my first question to you would be this: what is your communication plan with all of your suppliers? Are you communicating with them daily? Are you communicating with them weekly? Is it limited? Do you have a method of communication that is secure, consistent, and verifiable? One of the biggest pieces of communication and disconnect comes through the food recall notification. We all know that there are parameters and there are requirements around that. So is your supplier notifying you in a reasonable manner of any recalls that may be happening? Are they doing it at an item level? Are they giving you background information? Are they providing you lot numbers and expiration numbers? Are they giving this to you in a digital format so that you can manage it moving forward? That's the big communication disconnect. But as I did a little bit of research and have been in the industry for a while, there's a couple more that I didn't really think about until recently. One is, how is their communication plan on late deliveries? We all have very limited inventory, and we all have requirements that move that inventory through the production process very quickly. Just-in-time inventory. So what happens if the supplier's late? Do we have a plan in place to handle that? How does that affect our manufacturing and our scheduling? How does that affect our customers when we can't deliver because we don't have the right raw materials? Do we have backups? And then another area is, what happens when your supplier switches ingredients without you noticing? So maybe they did or didn't send you a notification that they changed an ingredient in the raw material that they provide. Are they letting you know, and are they making sure that that ingredient gets piped all the way through your production cycle, adjusting your bill of materials and your recipes, making sure that you have the right notifications to your customers in place for that as well? All of this contributes to supplier disconnect, as well as many, many more items. So take a look at your own supplier disconnect and see where it's at. The second thing is internal controls. And the first thing I would say about internal controls is lack of real-time tracking. So do you have to go to a file cabinet? Do you have to go find the file? Do you have to go down onto the production floor to get production metrics and KPIs and tracking documents? Are you able to access that in real time, sitting at your desk, or do you have to spend time finding it? And then when you do find it, what happens about human error? What happens when you have to read somebody's writing for a document that's on the floor and you read it as an S and not a 5? Now you have to go and try to figure out what is going on with that particular document. You have to spend time that you really don't have anymore to try to figure out what is the best path for recall. Do you have efficient traceability? And then finally, do you have adequate oversight? Do you have somebody, one person in charge that is responsible for that recall capability? That limits your exposure and gets things moving more quickly. The third thing is compliance knowledge. What is your compliance knowledge? I know that the requirements and regulations that are out there aren't just your single sentence, one line byline, right? There's rules that apply to that byline. There's rules that apply to the rules of the byline. And finally, there's rules that circumvent other rules. If you're in certain industries and do certain things, it gets really complex, really, really fast. So do you have people on staff that really understand compliance? Do you have somebody on staff that understands how to implement compliance in your particular industry or your particular company? And how are they able to articulate that to the people that are documenting that information? That's a full single point of compliance knowledge that has to be achieved in order for you to hit that accountability. And then theory of many hats. This is what I call, somebody in your organization, well, it's many people in your organization that have a little bit of knowledge about all the different parts of your organization. So you have shipping managers that know finance, and you have finance managers that know production and shipping. And then you have all of these different people that know just enough about each one of the other different departments and functions to be successful in and day out. But when it comes to an audit or a recall, you have too many people with too many different pieces of information to bring it together in a single process to do an audit. And then finally, the cost. What is the cost of a recall? So the cost comes into two flavors. You got the hard cost, which we all know. It's dollars that are being used and when you have to stop the line, when you have to do cleanouts, when you have to do changeovers. It's the cost of managing the process to do the recall. It's the cost of bringing all your managers together to go through the results and then provide that. Then there are soft costs, costs that I like to call the not so itty bitty costs. These are the reliability. What about your accountability? What about your brand identity? These are soft costs that affect your organization. And at the end of the day, all of these costs rolled together are steep. And even looking at the overhauling the processes from a manual process to an automated process might seem daunting, but in the end, it's much better for your organization. So how do we solve that? It's going to be standards like SQF. And then we'll get into the technology to back them up. Jonathan?
Great, Eric. Thank you. So what is SQF? Right, Safe Quality Food is a GFSI recognized standard, blending safety and quality. Think HACCP plus GMPs tailored for food and beverage. And it's not just a checkbox either. SQF certification signals trust to retailers and consumers. So, let's go over some of the key requirements. Starting from a documented food safety plan, you have to develop and maintain a comprehensive food safety plan that addresses potential hazards at every stage of production. To regulatory compliance, like completing food fraud vulnerability assessments, supply chain transparency is critical. Additionally, real-time monitoring of critical control points and traceability, as well as continuous improvements, are other key requirements that it takes to be SQF certified. So, as we look at FSMA and BRC, there is an overlap. FSMA's preventative controls mirror SQF's risk-based approach. BRC adds that global rigor. Both demand traceability and accountability. The catch? Compliance across all three of these is complex without integration. You have manual audits, siloed data, disjointed supplier records, as Eric alluded to earlier. And that makes SQF alone itself, very difficult, let alone, FSMA and BRC to go along with that. So that's really where we look to leverage Business Central and the YAVEON ProBatch to step in and simplify and strengthen your compliance game. Eric?
Awesome, thank you. So the next step, at the end of the day, let's look at the technology that's behind this. Now, really the story starts at Stone Ridge and our partnership with the YAVEON ProBatch. This is designed for food and bev, and the partnership helps facilitate the manufacturing of track and trace. That's everything to do with food and bev. So today, what I want to focus on really is what I call the traceability target. So the traceability target identifies preventative measures that happen inside Business Central. These preventative measures really help automate the monitoring and also the alerting process, which essentially help you catch before they escalate. So if we would start with the feature. The feature is what encapsulates the items that you're trying to track. And what we're talking about is from a preventative standpoint. So this first step is really about the preventative side. Once you've defined your features, you've got your inspection plan that encapsulates all the individualized features that help you track all of the ingredients and your production out the door. From there, once you've assigned your inspection plans, then you've got your inspection order. The inspection order is what walks your entire process through from a receiving perspective all the way to the shipment. So the next several slides, I'm going to go through individual screens that show each one of these features, inspection plans, and inspection orders so you can get a better understanding of what it looks like. So the first is my inspection feature card. I want to point out a couple of key features here. First is the feature type. So in this case, the feature type can be defined by yourself. It can be temperature, it can be visibility or visual, it can be size or weight, things that you define that apply to your particular company and your particular industry. So when you're tracking these features, you can also track them in different types of formats. So these formats could be decimal, they could be Boolean, like a yes or no, or they could be statistical or a number of other items that allow you to track and keep KPIs against those particular plans. Status or certified, you can have certified or non-certified, which help you determine which ones are in play and which ones aren't. I can set up calculation formulas, which reduce my need to have to figure out what my tracking method is going to be. I can also set up target values with min and max tolerances. So these sections here, allow me to track the different tolerances and make sure that when I am doing tests or when I am doing visual inspections, that they fall within the tolerance. Finally, as I come over here to the right-hand side, I've got electronic signatures. This is my traceability. This lets me know who approved this particular card, as well as the electronic signature that validates that and keeps that consistent for the life of that particular feature card. The second page represents my plan card. So this is where all of my inspection features come into play. They're all aggregated together so that now I can create this particular plan. The things I want to point out here are I can set up a business relation type. So I can have this applied to a vendor. I can have it applied to a manufacturing process or a customer. I can, pardon me, I can individualize it down to that customer, or I can individualize it to a vendor. So I can have different inspection plans for different vendors that are delivering my raw materials. I've got different notifications, so I can send out and set up notifications for different inside as well as outside personnel. And then I've got my inspection plan details, and these are all drop-down details. I can add comments to this particular plan card. I can add items like equipment, and I can add additional verbiage that then when I print this out and send it to people that they can see that there are specific requirements and regulations against them. Down here, here in my line section, I've got all of the plan cards, all of the feature cards aggregated together that help me manage those particular items. And finally, over here, I've got another electronic signature that then tracks and keeps who is authorized to be able to manage and approve this particular plan card. And finally, at the highest level, I've got my released inspection order. So this is what I assign to my warehouse receipts. This is what I can assign to my production process or my warehouse shipments. This is what I've done to aggregate my feature card and my plan cards together so that now I have full traceability at my line level. Now here, it looks very similar to my plan card, which it is, but now I can do actual value tracking. So I can track the actual values. Do they fit within the tolerance limits? And do they notify me if I'm outside those tolerance limits so that I can then take a specific action against that particular item? Again, electronic signatures and inspection order details, these all come within this particular plan or this order. Once I've finished the order, once I've received the item and I've gone through my QA check, I can finish my inspection and then I can print out a COA, so a certificate of analysis. I can provide those to the customers. I can put it on the shipment that goes out the door. All of that can now come into play when I'm ready to finish that particular plan. So now, if this was a movie, and we're in a bit of a hero's journey, I would say that the inspections here that I just showed you really are the heroine of the movie. The item tracing portion of Business Central is where you see the hero. So I want you to imagine something. You have a robust supplier communication plan. Your team is well versed in the regulations. You have the regulations posted and are ready to go. You've assigned a team member to be as accountable and take precedence when there is a recall. And finally, you've invested in an application to help you track and trace. So I want you to click the Go button. That's what this item tracing is. This item tracing is where I have full access to where I purchased my ingredient, to the full manufacturing process, as well as to where I sold it. So if we're looking at this particular screen, I can take a look at my tomato juice. I can take a look at where I purchased this particular tomato juice. I can see all of the different processes that it went through for production and all of the different lot numbered items that are associated to that particular item. So they had contact with that item. And then finally, I've got the customer that I sold it to, or in your case, the customers you sold it to. And all I needed to do was enter an item code and a lot number, and I get all of the lineage that's associated to that particular item. So full traceability. Now, with that full traceability, let's take a step back. Let's re-look at our recall stats and see what they say now. With Business Central and YAVEON ProBatch, I don't need days, I don't need hours, I just need minutes. Thousands and thousands of records can be looked through in minutes to prep a recall. I can reduce compliance because I don't have to go out onto the production floor. I don't have to go look through a filing cabinet. I don't have to bring spreadsheets together in order to come up with a recall plan. It's all ready made in the system, ready to go. It reduces my compliant costs by up to 20 to 30%. I can reduce my recall risk by taking proactive steps at identifying issues early. I can protect my bottom line because I'm addressing my proactive steps before they become a problem. And most importantly, at the end of the day, we can scale operations. And you don't have to scale without scaling your headaches. Stone Ridge and YAVEON ProBatch, we grow with you, we flex with you, and we journey with you.